Bonjour, my name is Shelley Means, and I am Ojibwe on my mother's side. I'm Lakota on my father's side. I work with Native Voices Rising as a senior advisor, and Native Voices Rising is a type of participatory grant making where we have a pooled fund that we invite in reviewers from the Native community to. They are carrying their Indigenous values into the work that they do, and they're accountable to the community that they're serving. And we fund completely general operating dollars across what we call Indian country on Turtle Island and the borders of the United States. We're unique because we kept learning from the wisdom of our own community about where the funds should go. We've had strategic conversations engaging all dimensions of our community to say we raise more money to this pooled fund. How do we prioritize that? And we got input from people who work in philanthropy and people in community and tribal leaders. Just recently, this year, we started an advisory council based on that input. So we're unique because in that very Indigenous way, we are learning from the people who came before us, mindful of the people who will be the future leaders in our community by engaging them in this practice of philanthropy. Philanthropy kept saying to Native folks that they just really didn't know anything about Native American communities, and so therefore they never had formed a Native portfolio. They didn't know where to find these groups. They never saw applications or proposals. And, in reality, if you're a health foundation, Native communities have health disparities and solutions for how to improve the health of our people. So that's just one example. Same with education, same for, just across the sector. And so we created a report. They brought in an elder from the urban Indian community in Chicago, Louis Delgado, and he was an esteemed, researcher and scholar and had worked in philanthropy for a lot of years. And he helped them design a research project. Let's create a database to just get these folks started so they can see where they can find these people. And so the researchers were all Indigenous people. The report is available online, 2012. So it's slightly outdated, but we are getting ready to release a 10-year report. So that original conversation really spurred a whole body of knowledge that we can now bring into this movement in philanthropy to engage communities, to resource the solutions that they see having impact. I think this is because our community is relatively small. We've recruited grant reviewers who are also working in the groups on the ground that are serving community. We have a very careful process for making sure they're not reviewing their own grant proposals or, a familiar organization's proposals. We also have been developing what we call supportive assistance. So it's kind of a cross between technical assistance for specific things that groups are naming as the kind of support that they need, and it's capacity building to do the work on their terms in their communities and to impact more broadly all of Indian country. And so what that looks like is quarterly webinars where we have expertise from the Native community and strong allies, coming in to have a conversation for our grant partners and for our reviewers and for our advisory council, for people who want to be a part of these webinars. I'll say that Joy Pearsall is on the staff now with NVR, and she's really building a database for us to share of Native people who are doing consulting in this sector. We're not asking them to do it pro bono. We're finding ways to resource them. And our grant partners can sign up to have 10 free hours that they don't have to take out of their own grant funding. Joy works really hard at the matchmaking part of it to make sure that these consultants, really understand what Native Voices Rising is all about. There's a group out of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe in South Dakota. They're called the Cheyenne River Youth Project, and they are developing leaders in their community by working directly with the youth and in partnership with their tribe, which is pretty unique. They host ways to just engage their young leaders to come to a space that's also an open space that other people can drop in and kind of see what's going on. And so some of those spaces might be a food giveaway during the pandemic, We're doing this thing. If you want to come and help distribute food to the elders, we're doing this. Through NVR's funding and other funding sources, they've developed a system that just continually brings people into the room who then say, well, why does the food system work this way? Maybe I want to understand more about why the federal government isn't fulfilling its treaty obligation to provide food for our community when it should be something different than that. I want to learn more about that. And so they engage in helping to educate their young people, not just in the policy aspect of it, but then they maybe take a field trip to Washington, D.C. They also plant gardens in, community spaces. And just invite people to come watch, come hang out, like a very safe and welcoming place for these young people to come and grow. We engage reviewers to look at applications, score them on their own individually, but then come back together in a committee and talk with each other. And so in that way, it's like a co-learning experience for everybody on the committee. We take all of the groups who've applied in the past and been funded, and we know for sure that they meet our eligibility criteria because it's always been the same. And then we go through any remaining groups. And so we have people who are program officers in philanthropy or Native Americans in philanthropy staff who figure out, does this group belong in the review process? Once we have all of our groups that we're going to be reviewing, we'll break them into 8 committees to do this work. Then we take the list of all of the known reviewers and we map it out so that we avoid conflicts of interest, and so that on each committee we have diversity. And from that, we do a 2-hour decision-making meeting. Each committee is different. They each have different personalities, but I think out of the integrity of the whole purpose of Native Voices Rising, we really want the grant size to be meaningful. So we do have serious conversations with our reviewers to consider that we really want these resources to have an impact in community. And then each committee, they have a couple of days to sit on it and really think, do I feel good about this? Is this the right way for us to go? And if not, we bring the group back together to see if there's a better decision we can reach. I want them to understand that in the sector, we're not an intermediary. We have many more dimensions than that. And so we don't want to just be in the business of funneling money from here to there. The work is in that sweet spot between institutional philanthropy and Native Voices Rising. So I feel like there's some cultural things that I would love for philanthropy to see. There's knowledge out there that has huge value, a lot of knowledge in Indian country. And it's just a matter of building those relationships and asking. My big 100-year vision picture of Native Voices Rising is that every community, any Native community of people who doesn't today have the resources to do the work they need to do for the health and the well-being and the future of their community, has the resources, because NVR changed philanthropy and changed their way of seeing their relationship to philanthropy and resources. We are celebrating 10 years of Native Voices Rising. And in this grant cycle, we'll be granting $3.5 million. We've also commissioned a 10-year commemoration report that is turning back to philanthropy to say, we want you to hear these things about the impact that this pooled fund and this type of participatory grant making has had on our community and on our reviewers and on philanthropy. I love this work with Native Voices Rising because it's the power in its rightful place in our community. The ancestors taught us there's enough here for everyone. And it's our absolute responsibility to see that everybody shares in that abundance. So many tribes have different ways of doing that. I think that's Native Voices Rising is carrying that, especially through our youth grant makers. I'm so excited, into understanding that ethic as it relates to, what we're doing here.